A warm welcome to another fresh package of Energy Frontiers with me, Justina Okechukwu. As always, we start with headline stories put together over the course of the week. International oil giant British Petroleum has delivered the first LNG cargo from Mozambique's Coral South floating LNG plant to Spain's Bilbao terminal for a combined cycle power plant in which the British major is a principal shareholder. In another development, the Egyptian Natural Gas Holding Company has awarded BP with 2 licenses to conduct exploration activities in offshore blocks in Egypt's Nile Delta area. According to the General Electricity Company of Libya, the 500 megawatt solar energy project in the country has received confirmation from the French energy multinational Total Energies. Total stated that it will link its production to the national grid within the precise time period that has been agreed upon by the two parties. Namibia's Hyphen Hydrogen Energy has signed a memorandum of understanding with the German multinational energy company RWE to buy up to 300,000 tons of green ammonia per year from a planned $10 billion green hydrogen project in Namibia. Hyphen is the appointed preferred bidder by the government in a 40-year deal to develop the first green hydrogen project in Namibia for exports. Fortescue Future Industries has announced that the company is in talks with the General Authority for the Suez Canal Economic Zone to begin production on the green hydrogen project in Egypt in 2027, with all stages completed by year 2030. The project will include renewable energy stations with a capacity of 7,600 megawatts to produce approximately 330 kilotons of green hydrogen annually once all stages of the project are completed. South Africa on Thursday signed project agreements with 13 preferred bidders from the round 5 of the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program. According to an advisory from the Department of the Mineral Resources and Energy, these projects will add 975 megawatts to the national grid. And that was a snapshot of your energy news headlines. Up next, the International Energy Agency says renewables will overtake coal and become the world's biggest source of electricity generation by 2025. This is Energy Frontiers. Welcome back to the program. The International Energy Agency says global renewable capacity growth is expected to double by 2,400 gigawatts to 5,640 gigawatts over the next 5 years. In its latest report published during the week, the IEA says it expects renewables to account for nearly 40% of worldwide electricity output in 2027, coinciding with a fall in the share of coal, natural gas, and nuclear generation. In his opening remark at the report's presentation, the IEA chief Fatih Birol said the global energy crisis had kicked renewables into an extraordinary new phase of even faster growth as countries seek to capitalize on their energy security benefits. Here is an excerpt.
Just after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, we are in the middle of the first global energy crisis. In the last 20 years, we have been already seeing a rapid expansion of renewables. But now, when you look at our numbers, even in the current policy setting, in the next 5 years, the growth will be equal to what we have seen in the last 20 years. In the next 5 years, ladies and gentlemen, the world will add a renewable capacity as much as it did in the last 2 decades, or if you want to put in another context, we will put renewable capacity in place in the next 5 years equal to the current power capacity of China. So huge growth. Why it is happening? A big growth for renewables. In addition to the, of course, climate commitments that the many countries have been pushing as a key driver of renewables, we are seeing two new elements, at least two new elements, which are turbocharging the renewables growth. The first one is energy security. Many countries around the world see renewables now an option to address the energy security concerns. It is very obvious, for example, in Europe. Many countries in Europe, we are seeing huge growth in renewables in Europe, and this is, among other reasons, this is driven by replacing Russian gas imports, at least partly, by renewables. So energy security is a driver. Another driver is we all know that the cost of renewables came down recently significantly in the last few years, but the high and volatile fossil fuel prices, gas, coal, makes renewables competitive, even more competitive when it comes to electricity generation, and high oil prices make biofuels in transportation sector even more attractive. In the year 2027, in 5 years of time, the latest solar, I must say renewables altogether, only solar will be the number one source of electricity in the world. So solar is and will be the king of global power markets. So this is very impressive. It is driven by solar installations in India, China, Europe, United States, and elsewhere. And to see such a big growth of solar is, of course, very good news for many reasons, from energy security to economic benefits, from economic benefits to environmental benefits. Another important finding of the study is on the manufacturing side. We all know, and our numbers show, that China, after years and years investing in the solar manufacturing, as of today, covers about 90% of the global solar manufacturing capacity at home. But as a result of the efforts and the new investment programs coming from United States in terms of the Inflation Reduction Act, and also from India, we are seeing that this and other countries, this 90% will go down about 75%, even a bit less, in 2027. So we are seeing a diversification of solar manufacturing in the world. Still, of course, China will have the lion share. The hydrogen, the renewable based hydrogen, we are seeing 100-fold increase between now and 2027. And our numbers show that the hydrogen, the renewable use for hydrogen may reach around 50 gigawatts by 2027. A very promising start for clean hydrogen, and as such, we think it is something to underline as well. Now, dear colleagues, my last finding I want to share with you is the following. The numbers, in my view, very impressive growth of renewables, these numbers I share with you, are in the context of the current policy setting. And it may well be the case that the governments understand the merits of pushing renewables even stronger in terms of its energy security, economic and environmental benefits, pushing some additional policy buttons ranging from cutting the red tape in the context of permitting and licensing to the providing financial incentives to renewables and providing more certainty in the markets, these numbers may be even higher. So as such, we have a so-called accelerated case if the governments would push the renewables a bit stronger, and you will see that the numbers could go much higher, even higher than I have just highlighted to you.
The World Bank and the African Development Bank have jointly presented 2 new electricity regulatory index reports. Details just ahead. This is Energy Frontiers with me, Justina Okechukwu. The African Development Bank and the World Bank have joined forces to launch 2 new energy regulatory index reports: the Electricity Regulatory Index for Africa, ERI 2022, and the Global Electricity Regulatory Index, GERI 2022 reports. This year's edition of the ERI 2022 report covers 44 of the 45 countries identified with independent regulatory authorities, while the first edition of the GERI 2022 covers 82 non-OECD countries from across the globe, with about half of them being from sub-Saharan Africa. Here is a panel of experts at the World Bank AfDB unveiling, speaking to electricity regulatory environment in Africa within the context of the global energy transition.
Significant progress can be made in meeting climate change and net zero commitments by increasing renewables in generation, as you know. However, we see that despite wind and solar power becoming commercially viable globally, these resources remain largely untapped in Africa. So what specific actions should African regulators take to support the expansion of, for example, renewable energy in particular?
Thank you so much for the invitation. And I think, just following the first, kind of echoing the first panel, I'm going to focus more on kind of the substance recommendations. At the IEA, I think and I think, kind of timely with yesterday, we had the release of the Renewables report, where we kind of have an idea that, we expect in the next 5 years to have as many renewables as we did in the last 20 years. And, this can actually be accelerated by, I think, even up to 3,000 terawatts if we actually remove the barriers. And here, what one of the main barriers we have seen is that, and I think also, again, what Mr. Vanda said just now, is that we need to kind of empower regulators to see themselves as kind of the accelerators for the renewables deployment. In many cases, in some of the networks that we run as well, you may be aware at the IEA, we will work mainly with ministries. We're starting to work more increasingly with regulators. And one of the main challenges we see here is, as mentioned earlier, if the policymakers do not give the opportunity to the regulators to implement the new mandates, it is quite difficult to fit, objectives of decarbonization, kind of the work plans and actually the tools that they have.
When we think about the energy transition, we are thinking about changing first the primary energy sources, including more renewables, but we also need to think in improving the transformation process, reducing losses, increasing the efficiency of the process. And finally, there's the demand side to the transition, which involves electrification, energy efficiency, and so on. So of all these different dimensions of the transition, I want to, given the limited time available, concentrate on one particular aspect, which is changing the primary energy source, or changing the energy matrix towards including more renewable, a challenge that James just mentioned is pending in Africa. And within that, specifically from the Latin American experience of using auctions as a mechanism to procure new renewable energy. Out of Latin America, more than 16 countries have successfully implemented auctions programs to buy, in some cases, just renewables. In other cases, the auctions are open to different energy technologies. But the process themselves are very interesting and very useful. So that's the thing I think I want to focus, this very particular aspect of the energy transition.
Rashid, let me turn to you and ask you a question about energy efficiency. How do you think African regulators are considering energy efficiency? And then let me turn to Calixte to see if we can explore a little bit about the investments that are required to meet Africa's growing demand for renewable energy, and just talk a little bit about how Africa is conceiving the issue of investment and financing. So, Rashid, over to you first.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to highlight the importance of the energy efficiency in the African perspective. First of all, I think energy efficiency in Africa, considering the low access of electricity, it is very important at least to use what we have wisely. That's number one. Number two, we expect by 2050, the electricity share in the energy supply will increase from 20% now to 50%. That means energy efficiency, it is important for Africa since we are building our system. And of course, considering the population's dimension, by 2050, Africa will be 2.5 billion instead of 1.4 now, and it will be more than 4.3 million by 2100. And I think this shows the importance of energy efficiency now and tomorrow.
African countries have made significant efforts to invest in clean energy. And we, as example, they installed renewable generation capacity grew from 35 gigawatt in 2017 to 54 gigawatt in 2021. So a 65% increase of total capacity. So, but there is still a need to scale up this effort if we want to achieve commitment related to Paris Agreement and pathway to net zero in the framework of just and the energy transition. And to do more requires scaling up investment, which comes to your question, what Africa needs to do to attract more investment in renewable energy. One of the gaps is a regulatory gap, and the second one is the need to enhance the adequate medium to long-term integrated planning that includes the grid stability and energy security matters.
And that's the package for you this week, and we thank you for watching. Remember to follow Energy Frontiers on Frontier Africa Reports website and across all our social media handles as indicated on the screen. It's goodbye from me, Justina Okechukwu, and I'll see you next time.